What's up, everybody? It's Chad. I'm back again with another episode of Ask Chad Grassy Logic. This week, I'm here with my buddy Colt DeMorris. Thanks for joining me, man.
Thanks, Chad. Thanks for having me.
Heck yeah, man. I'm glad you made that little drive up. Thanks for doing that. It's been a couple weeks since I had an in-person guest, so it's kind of nice to, have someone in the studio with me because the past couple weeks I have people from remote that had COVID, and yeah, it was just the whole, fiasco thing. So thank you for joining me. Today we're going to be talking about a few things, but first, we'll just get started off in the episode. We'll talk about Colt DeMorris. So you and I, have a lot of history. We tackle a lot of cannabis stuff together here in New Mexico,
For sure.
even in the Texas, El Paso area. I used to even, attend, some of your normal meetings back in the day. When I was a part of the New Mexico Medical Cannabis Patients Advocacy Alliance. I can still say it. When I was a part of that group and everything. So, it's been a long time. So, for the people who don't know, could you share a little bit, about who you are, where you come from, and background and all that?
Definitely. Well, I mean, it all started back in 2009. I watched my mother take her last breath from cancer. And when that happened, I wanted it. I never wanted somebody to feel the way I felt or have to go through what she went through. So I started my journey on educating myself on cannabis. I knew at the time that, cannabis could help patients that were going through chemotherapy eat and stuff. But then I started coming across a little bit more research showing that, people were beating cancer with cannabis and stuff like that. So I wanted to dive into that, started reading medical studies and the like, and I started educating people on Facebook. A couple years into that, I came across Dallas-Fort Worth NORML. I knew what NORML was. I didn't know there was little chapters everywhere. And I came across Dallas-Fort Worth NORML, and I went to look for an El Paso NORML. And when I did, there wasn't one. So I felt that was an opportunity to give El Paso a voice in the cannabis reform fight. So I founded El Paso NORML 10 years ago in January. We just had a 10-year birthday. And ever since then, it's been about educating the public, trying to keep people out of jail and get medical patients access in my state, in my community. I started in the New Mexico medical industry in 2020. And ever since then, I've been helping patients in my community that spans not just El Paso, but, southern New Mexico, get and gain access and keep it.
Yeah, and that's something that, was, especially during the medical days, was really important because we had to do a lot of outreach because people just didn't know we had a medical cannabis program in the first place.
Right.
And that's one thing that I learned, during my advocacy time trying to help the vets get their cards. Like, we can do that? And I was like, yeah, but I have VA. And I was like, I do too. And they're like, oh. So, yeah, so I'm glad that, we were able to kind of work together in tandem, with that kind of, mission and everything. And, I guess I'll, talk about this now. I wanted to talk it later on the show, but you were the first out-of-state patient in New Mexico, correct?
So when we talk out-of-state patients, we think reciprocal patients.
Yes, of course.
I wasn't a reciprocal patient at first. I was actually a hard card New Mexico holder. They messed up on the law and wrote it to where anybody that was a person could access, and
not a resident.
I challenged, there were others that challenged it too, but I challenged the wording of the law and definitely was able to get into the New Mexico medical program as a Texas resident.
Yeah, and that lasted for what, 3 years?
Yep, 3 years.
It expired what, almost 2 years ago or a year and a half ago?
October 22 is when my card expired.
Yeah. Well, no, you just reciprocity, helps, but
yeah.
But yeah, that was an interesting time. But yeah, they messed up one word, and that changed everything. You could have been from Djibouti, and you could have got your medical cannabis card in New Mexico so long as that you were a person. So yeah, that was an interesting time, and I kind of wanted to just bring that up because it's one of those things that like a lot of people don't know that happened in the New Mexico medical program. We had a short, it was maybe not even a year, that they had it until they changed it, but a lot of people that were here already grandfathered to stay in.
Yes. Yeah. It was about a year, and then when they changed it, that's when they kicked off the reciprocal program.
Yeah.
At that, and even then, they left that open.
Yeah.
Really loose. You just needed a doctor recommendation. So anybody who's getting a doctor recommendation from anywhere.
Yeah.
And that let a lot of people in, but then they finally changed it, tightened it up, where it had to be, you had to have proof from the governmental regulatory authority of the state that you were in. So, yeah, it's been a nice little
Little transition change. Yeah,
definitely.
yeah,
Nice little path.
yeah. Yeah, to where we're at now, because now anybody with a medical cannabis card can use it here. I mean, there's still a little process that you have to go through, but luckily most places are trained on that. Because I know at the very beginning there was a lot of places that didn't know how to do that.
Yeah, they didn't know how to
Yeah.
do it. They were scared to do it,
Yeah.
in the beginning, because, a lot of states were able to show cards.
Yeah.
Texas doesn't issue cards. So there was no way to prove by the government authority in Texas that you were in the program.
Yeah.
That was until, I came across a printout from the DPS. That's actually who runs the medical program in Texas, is the Department of Public Safety. Which is a far cry from the Department of Health.
Yeah. Yeah. Not much better.
So now we're able to, and it's tricky to get those papers, but now we're able to get those documents, and the state of New Mexico approved them.
Good. Yeah.
So
And now it's a learning process. Where the industry itself for adult sales hits 2 years on Monday. So we're barely getting there. So usually year 5 is when we have like a more stabilized kind of industry.
right.
Looking from other states. New Mexico might be a little sooner, might be a little later, and depending on what else is going on, the possible rescheduling, or descheduling. If Texas happens to just get a wild hair up its ass and go legal, several things could happen that just would change things significantly here.
Definitely.
But let's talk about the work you've done, actually, the advocacy side. Let's talk about that for a minute. We'll jump back to all the other stuff, because those are cool conversations. But I really want to pinpoint all the stuff that you've been doing, not just New Mexico wise, but Texas. You've done kind of jumped both. Like I only kind of work with the El Paso stuff. I kind of in the area. It's kind of like a sister city kind of thing. So what affects them affects us, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what have you done like in New Mexico wise, advocacy wise.
Advocacy wise, just helping patients that weren't able to get into the program get in and stay in the program. Get access to RSO for patients. One of the big things that we didn't do it last year, but the prior 2 years, myself and stepdaughter Bennett, who you had on a couple episodes ago, we every year we would donate oil to a patient in memory of her mother, my wife, that had passed in 2016. So it's little things like that, assisting patients where we can. New Mexico wise.
Well, I guess we'll jump over to
actually, and I guess there's a little bit more.
There you
go. We did and we've done it together. A lot of work in city council here in Las Cruces, fighting for
Yeah, we got the 24 hours.
We got the 24 hours.
We did, that was pretty cool.
Trying to not have them tighten up on an industry that doesn't need tightening up on right now.
Yeah, because the industry is so young, and then there's just not enough data to really cracking down on it right now.
Yeah, we don't need overregulation. That's when bad things happen.
Yeah, overregulation just causes too many issues. It'd be great if we would kind of regulate ourselves, self-regulate ourselves here in the industry. If someone's messing up, like, hey, stop fucking up. How can I help you get to regulation? To regulatory. So that way you don't get shut down or you make us look bad, et cetera, et cetera. But unfortunately, that hasn't really been going on. Maybe in the future, there's chances for that. But if that doesn't start happening, they're just going to start creating more laws, and they kind of try to do that this year with like the drive-through thing. They tried to pull that little thing under us. It wasted so much time during the 30-day session. It was almost just like a speed bump. And then you end up with that. And so that's one of the things that we have to be really persistent on. But for New Mexico, we could talk about that for days. Let's talk about Texas. You do a shit ton of stuff in Texas. You go to the state legislature over there, which is significantly farther for you than it is to go into Santa Fe for us. How far is that drive anyway? I mean, I'm sure you fly.
The drive is about 10 hours, about 10 and a half hours to get to Austin. I do fly, just because it's a time crunch.
I wouldn't. Yeah, I don't blame you.
But yeah, I stay involved in Austin at the Capitol. We try to do it. So Texas has a legislative session every other year for 6 months. So it's we're up there every other year at least. I'm always involved with my representatives locally. the guy that has spearheaded cannabis reform in Texas, Representative Joe Moody. He's my representative, and I got him on board. Actually, we're about at the 10-year mark for that. Right after we kicked off Normal in January of 2014, I thought to myself, well, I'm about to go tell the public that they need to get involved with their representatives. They need to contact their representatives. So I need to do the same. And I did. Joe Moody sat down with me and we had a talk. And at the time, Washington, D.C. was going through a decriminalization process where they had a bill that would turn anything under an ounce into a civil penalty of $100.
Yeah.
That's it. I took him that bill at our conversation and I told him, look, if it's good enough for our nation's capital, it's good enough for Texas.
Yeah.
And he looked at the bill and he's told me before, he walked out of that meeting and called his staff and was like, give me a good reason why I shouldn't file this bill.
Yeah.
And nobody could. So that bill's been filed, it was written for Texas law and has been filed every year since 2015. He's done so much on that front, trying to end arrests, and over the years he's progressed to now. Last year he filed a legalization bill. The legalization bill didn't have any movement really, but it did make a big advance. It was read in committee. And when they do that, they have to draw up a report of what the bill would do to the state's budget. And now everybody sees just a hint of what money is being missed out on the state.
Yeah.
And so we're making that advance. I think we're still a long way off from that. But I've, been involved locally with city council many times. I was going for about 2 years straight every meeting. Working on cite and release. It's something. It's not the answer, but it's to start, and it keeps people out of jail for the most part. I mean, we're still having a lot of arrests in El Paso, but we got that seen through the finish line, and man, I stay involved with the people that represent me in my area because they're going to be the ones that can change the laws, especially when it comes to Texas drug laws.
Yeah, I mean they're harsh, as we all know, that even taking a pen down there can get you a state felony, which is harsh on any means. Even an edible, they weigh the whole thing. So if you have a half pound or quarter pound brownie, they're gonna charge you for a quarter pound, half pound of cannabis, which is ridiculous because most of what's in there is sugar and flour.
Definitely. We had a kid, an 18-year-old kid in Texas, get caught with a plate of brownies.
Oh, I remember that.
They weighed everything, and he was looking at life for brownies.
Yeah.
He didn't get it. He got 10 years probation, but I mean,
Still
just even
ridiculous,
consider your whole life ruined over brownies is ridiculous.
Yeah. And that's something that I have to tell people too. My friends who use cannabis from other states, that I've met throughout the years who moved or whatever, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna go to Texas. I think I'm gonna take my pen." I was like, "Do not do that." Yeah, like what? I was like, just don't. Yeah, like there's other means when you get there, but you just don't. That's not even worth it. So a lot of them have listened, luckily, and they're like, "Yeah, dude, they're pretty strict. They're looking." I was like, "Yeah, they look for it, dude. It's not like they're like laid back about it. Really, they're looking." So
it's a game to them.
Yeah, it is. A little cat and mouse game for them. Like ha ha ha.
For sure.
And so it's unfortunate, but luckily. People like yourself exist there, and of course, a couple other advocates that I've had the honor of meeting through you that from Texas. Some of them came down for the first sale for New Mexico. I remember that the first night we had our first sales, and so that was cool to meet them, and kind of the differences of the advocacy work from different states. It's always the same, but always different, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Every state has their own main concerns, their own what they're trying to do, their own way to do it. Because Texas, you have to do it a weird way there, because of the politics.
Yeah.
The way the state runs. And you mentioned earlier that every other year you were there. So can you elaborate a little bit on that? How often does Texas have its legislative session?
Yeah, so it's once every other year, odd number years, and they only meet for 6 months. So it's bills start getting filed December, the year prior to session. And session kicks off in January and ends about the end of May.
End of May, dang.
Yeah, so it's quick. I mean, and there's thousands and thousands of bills filed. So
it's a big state. You
For
know,
sure.
and it's not it's not just El Paso that's incorporated; it's the whole state that they that they do this in. So yeah, that's millions upon millions of people that are being representative through this. Not like just New Mexico; it's 2 million people. But and even us, we have a 30-day and a 60-day session, and we barely get stuff through sometimes. Sometimes like even with the Cannabis Regulation Act, it took a special session to get it passed. We couldn't get it passed. I think it was in a 60-day session. There was a lot of filibustering. Don't get me wrong, but we couldn't get it done. But that's what it took. So sometimes it feels like you have a lot of time, but you have especially when it comes to legislative stuff. So where do you see Texas going from here though? Like do you see them legalizing here soon, or maybe waiting until the federal government does something? Like where do you kind of see them?
Well, while we have the top three in power, Governor Greg Abbott, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, and his name's skipping my mind right now, but those are really the two biggest ones. Why we have them in power, um, things aren't going to go far.
Yeah.
Um, we had the bill that I had talked about earlier that Joe Moody filed. Over the years, it had changed. He filed it initially for that $100 fee, and then legislators brought up, hey, well, who's going to pay the filing fee of all this? So it went from $100 to $250 civil penalty. Well, then him and the last election cycle, Governor Abbott and the one that was running against him, Sheriff Lupe, I can't think of her last name right now, Sheriff Lupe, she was out of Dallas though, who was running for the Democratic ticket of governor. They had a debate, and Governor Abbott came out and said that he would support dropping cannabis to a Class C misdemeanor. So Joe Moody rewrote the bill, tailored it to what the governor would support, and the lieutenant governor, who's the president of the Senate, just kills everything.
Yeah.
So he's a really big problem. The Senate hasn't really made too much movement because of him. We've gotten things passed out of that house like that bill, but when it gets to the Senate, it disappears and dies.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the sad part. That's the crappy thing about working with politics and law stuff is you run into those issues, and it's freaking heartbreaking. It's like loss after loss after loss. And like here, we finally got a win, but it took us so long. And unfortunately for Texas, but fortunate for us because we are making a lot of money from it. Here in New Mexico, I think over half of our sales come from Texas. So that's one reason why I do talk about Texas a lot is because what they do affects us. So if they legalize it at any point, that's going to affect the New Mexico market heavily. We made $1 billion within less than 2 years. That wouldn't have been possible without out-of-state help. Like that. There's only 2 million people here. And if you look at most sales for for their sales, the medical sales are down here and the rec sales are up here. So there's a big disparity when it comes to those sales anyway. So that's one reason why I want to keep you guys informed of what's going on too. Plus, in the end, all of us around the whole nation, around the world, should be allowed to use cannabis, whatever substance we really feel that'll help us with whatever, or, especially if you talk to your doctor about it. There's times where people use fentanyl, with their doctor's clearance. I had a couple vet buddies who had a fentanyl sucker. He told me he had a damn sucker that was fentanyl. I was like, what?
Yeah.
And so, if it's okay with your doctor, whatever, whatever use case, but that to me was a little crazy, but I feel that everybody should have access to cannabis, especially people down in Texas. It's a big state, it's a big market, and once you guys go legal, that we'll see how things change for Sunland Park because they kind of got popular overnight.
Definitely. Once Texas goes legal, it's going to hurt Sunland Park.
Yeah.
Let's say 80. I was just on the news with the mayor and the chief of police out in Sunland Park, and they're saying like 80% of their traffic out there is Texas.
Yeah.
Texas plates.
Yeah.
So once a move like that is made in Texas, it's definitely going to hurt the whole state.
Yeah.
The whole state.
Oh yeah. The whole state will
Hobbs.
feel it. Yep. Hobbs, Carlsbad, Clovis.
Yep.
All those areas will feel it. Jal down to Eunice, those areas super southeastern New Mexico. All those places will really feel it because they're making a lot of money right now. Those places like Jal and Eunice, they're very tiny towns, but they're next to a lot bigger Texas cities, that are closer to them than their own state capital. So these people are gonna, take that little 2-hour trip, whatever it is for them. They're gonna go get their cannabis just like they do here. So yeah, once that happens, it's going to change things night and day for something. That's why I'm telling people now, you have to figure out a way to keep the Texans here now and of course in the future, because you want them to stay here and keep spending money. And so I guess that's one reason why they started doing that, pretty much that adult playground that they're going to be making, like the adult amusement park. I forget the name of it. It's changed a couple of times. And so that should help, but I don't know if that's the answer. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if that's the full answer.
Yeah.
Because, they already have a casino racetrack. They already have an amusement park down there, and those aren't enough. Maybe this last thing will be, the thing that it needs, but we'll see.
You talking about the amphitheater?
They
got that coming too.
That's true. They are getting the amphitheater too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Southern Park is building. That's why I call it Little Dubai. They're building all kinds of crazy stuff down there. Stuff that you wouldn't expect Southern Park to have. Because that like adult theme park thing is going to be on down by the river and everything like that.
Yeah. That's what I was gonna say. You know just as good as I do. They want to build like a whole river walk down there.
Yeah, a whole thing, which is cool. I love that for them.
Yeah.
I just hope that they can do it in time. They execute it well, because we're on a time limit. Like maybe 5 years tops. But if they just reschedule, which I think is going to happen this year, that could change it, because Texas has a trigger law, don't they?
They do,
yeah.
But it still has to be approved.
Okay.
There is some kind of head that approves it. So even if they were to deschedule, I still think that Texas may keep it illegal for the time being.
Until whatever happens.
Yeah.
Which that's a little ridiculous, but because New Mexico, we have a trigger law here, but that's only for interstate commerce. If we want to say sell to Arizona and vice versa, it just takes 2 governors of both states agreeing. Once that happens, but that's the only trigger law we have. And for Texas, that's great, but at the same time, you have that person that's in charge that probably isn't going to say yes. Which I could see that for Texas. Which is unfortunate. So for the time being, you're kind of stuck with the legislature, huh?
Yeah, and that would be like if it's descheduled. If it's rescheduled, who knows what route it's going to go. It's going to take it and put it in farmers' hands, and basically we're already set up for that in Texas.
Yeah.
Everything's prescribed. It's not recommended like every other state in the United States. So we're kind of set up for the rescheduling, which is kind of scary, because it's going to take it out of everybody. It's going to take it out of the general public hands.
Yeah.
Unlike every other state.
Yeah, and that's interesting how how it might work over there, because you're right. Here in New Mexico, it's a recommendation. It's kind of considered a prescription, but it's not. It's a recommendation. So that's cool that they actually went that route and gave it an actual prescription. So it makes also sense why it's a little harder to obtain it, through the channels that versus what we have to do here. So maybe that'll change in the future. We'll see with federal guidelines and everything. Like I've been keeping you guys updated on, like the rescheduling, descheduling thing. That's something that I would say probably happens before the summer, because we're in an election year, a presidential election year. And if something doesn't happen, those votes are going to get lost. And, there's a bunch of chatter on that about already, like, oh, whenever something happens, the numbers fluctuate up, whenever something positive happens with cannabis. And, this being even started in the first place is, like a huge thing. But the timeline we're on, it seems like it's short. Like earlier today too, something that was weird. I guess 3 Republican congressmen wrote a letter to the DEA, recommending that they don't reschedule and to keep it illegal. It's just the boomer guys, the ones that are reefer madness stuck and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So there's still those people, and of course there's been talks of certain individuals in the DEA having negative thoughts and feelings about doing it too. So we'll see what happens. 3 things can happen really, in my opinion. We can not do anything, it can stay the same where we are right now, then we're probably 5 years away. We could deschedule it altogether, which will change the nation's industry upside down overnight, really. And my prediction is if we go any other route of descheduling, rescheduling, we're going to end up with 2 different industries anyway, because we're going to have a transitional time from going from one industry to the other anyway. And then even then, some states might say, screw it, we're keeping both, a 280E and then a deschedule or reschedule, whatever it may be. Because, we do that already. We say, well, I don't care what you say. If it's Schedule 1, we have an industry. So what's us to say, like, well, if they don't want to go to that side, they can stay on this side. So, that's just kind of my prediction, just from what other states tend to do. I don't see a lot of them doing it, but at the very beginning, everybody's going to do that, because there's going to be that point where people just can't afford it. They don't want to, they're trying to figure out how to, the federal government's figuring out their guidelines, whatever it may be. But there's going to be a point where some of us are going to be on the 280E traditional and the others are going to be on the deschedule, reschedule. So, what are your kind of thoughts on that, like descheduling, rescheduling?
Well, if any of them are going to happen, deschedule.
Yeah.
Don't reschedule. They're talking about rescheduling to Schedule 3. What other Schedule 3 drug is out there that you can walk into a store and get?
Yeah.
None.
Yeah.
And that takes it and puts it in big pharma's hands, which is something I'm completely against. Um, and I really my focus is I want people out of jail, and I want patients to have access. If the federal government leaves it to states to figure out, let's do that.
Yeah.
But it does suck in the instance that like businesses can't get tax deductions and stuff like that. But we need to figure that out. Banking, we need to figure that out.
Yep.
But I'm not too gung ho about rescheduling. If we're gonna do anything, deschedule. If not, leave us to fight another day.
Yeah, that's how I'm fine. I'm fine with waiting another 5 years because we already have a legal industry here. And the more states are going legal every year, so it's just going to go more and more. There's not much they can do about it. And the other hang up, I guess for deschedule right now is there's a lot of, and that was actually one of the Republicans that said they shouldn't, is we're going to be going against a bunch of treaties, like whatever treaties that we have with NATO or whatever. And I'm a firm believer, fuck them treaties. Like I don't know how many treaties we go against anyway to start with. So I mean, what is us to say
One
that?
more.
Yeah, and Canada and Germany and a bunch of other countries, they've already legalized it already. Some Canada's had it for over 10 years now, I think, right?
Yeah,
just about over 10 years now. So I mean, and it's not an issue for them. So fuck them treaties. Let's just deschedule it and get it done with, and let's stop playing these little weird games because we're one of the most powerful nations in the world. And so, why can't we just have legal weed?
Yeah, and we're playing with people's lives, and it's not funny.
No, it's not. A lot of people are going to prison for this, and some people are, doing life sentences. They treat you harsher for drugs than they do for killing people. That's what blows my mind. This guy murdered his wife the other day because she was cheating, and he did 5 years, maybe 10. Like he's not doing that very long. And I'm like, good Lord, that's crazy. He killed somebody.
Yeah.
So, you smoke some weed or get caught with it, and then you can end up longer,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you look at this new thing that came out on the Nickelodeon situation, one of those guys that molested one of the child actors got 16 months in prison.
That's ridiculous.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we got people for a plant in there for 10 years and more.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stuff like that. We need to focus on victims with crimes and take care of those and leave the victimless crimes alone. You know what I mean? Or not even crimes. The people that don't have victims or don't hurt anybody, like cannabis consumers, just leave them alone.
Yeah.
Go after the big criminals.
Yeah. I mean, there's even now with legal cannabis, even we'll ask DPS all the time, any issues? No, no issues for cannabis, like everything's hunky dory, especially here in Cruces.
Yeah. I mean, the Sunland Park chief of police, they haven't had many issues out there, if any.
Yeah.
It's not the end of the world. The earth's not going to fall out from under our feet. And many states prove that time and time again.
Yeah, 100%. Well, man, I really appreciate the conversation and everything. And thanks for talking to me about New Mexico and Texas. It's very rare that I get to do that with somebody. Kind of coincide both together. Get your experience, especially from that side. Especially with you working with the legislation. I rarely get something like that, so I appreciate it, man. And maybe when you guys have the legislative session, I can bring you on again. We can kind of update each other, and we'll see what happens from then on, to then. So we'll see. But sure. Before we move on, where can people find you online and everything? Give you a follow.
Instagram, Colt DeMorris, at Colt DeMorris 420, El Paso Normal. You can also check out what we're doing with Texas Cannabis Collective, Astro Buds, and then my profile, Colt DeMorris, on Facebook.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I appreciate it, man. And yeah, give him a follow, see what's going on with Texas, and you'll see him around me. You guys usually do anyway. So I appreciate it, Colt. And yeah, let's continue on with the conversation, man. We got a couple other topics to talk to you guys about before we move on. This next one, really important, and if you don't care about it, there's something wrong, because it's really important. So this couple of days ago, actually Sunday, a recall was administered by the Cannabis Control Division. They had notified the media. The media obviously did an article right away on it. It was a very vague, short article, of course, because it was done so quickly. However, they did notify the manufacturers, the producers, and everybody involved with it. However, they didn't put on any of their socials. RLD, they have access to Instagram, Twitter, I think YouTube, and Facebook. I think they might have Facebook, but they have access to many of those. And if they would have shared it on that, it would have got to more people, and maybe more people would have understood versus, kind of what happened. Because it was kind of a big freak out. Like a lot of people kind of freaked out. They're making assumptions, this and that, and blaming and pointing fingers everywhere. And we don't need that, guys. Like this is going to happen. Recalls happen. I mean, it happens with lettuce. Like let's be honest, it happens with everything.
Yeah.
And cannabis isn't short of that. This is going to happen in the industry. Should it happen? No, it shouldn't happen in any industries, but it does. There's a way things are and a way things should be. And right now, I get it. We are angry because the situation that we're left with our testing, because our testing is everywhere around the nationwide is dog shit. It's inconsistent. There's too many issues. There's too much stuff going under the radar, being swept under the rug, and being allowed put on the market. So, I mean, I get it. We're frustrated. We can't trust it. But at the same time, there's a time and a place, and, there's a way things are and a way things should be. So come to find out that the pesticide that they use is called Malathion. Malathion is just a common pesticide used. It's almost like a nerve agent to bugs, and I'll explain more of that in a little bit. This was actually processed originally in 2022, was when it was initially processed and tested. I guess the retail spot that had it decided to get it retested because I guess the test expired. And once they retested it, that's when they found the Malathion. The testing facility that tested it the first time, I guess they weren't aware that they had to test for Malathion, and they're the only ones who are now testing for Malathion and following all the regulations. So they actually found the Malathion later, and it's because that nobody else is testing for the Malathion. I think you checked before we started that, they are the only one, right?
Yeah. That I can tell.
Yeah. And I'm just trying to get you guys all the information first before we go on, so that way we all know what's going on. So let me catch my breath real quick because that was a lot of stuff to share real fast. So here in New Mexico, actually, and I'm clarifying this with the CCD, I contacted them. They sent me to their media person. I gave her a bunch of questions in an email. Obviously, they didn't, reach back to me in time for the show because they hit me up this morning. But I was asking them, and I want to clarify if you can do that. I'm pretty sure you can't. I just want to clarify. Pretty sure once it's done, the sample, that's it. You got to get rid of it. You got to destroy it. It's a done product. So I'm kind of wondering where that came from. I know in the medical days we did that, but why did it stick around for so long if that's the case? That's a little worrisome. It means there's a lot of people out there getting stuff retested and just putting it back on the shelf, and it's there for 2-3 years.
Yeah, I'm not a manufacturer or have that knowledge, but there's a manufacturer that I had talked with some months ago, and they said that nothing really changes on the concentrate after that year.
Yeah.
It's not like it's spoiled milk and goes bad. And we were under the impression that it could be retested.
Yeah.
Obviously that's coming out now that it can't be, and if that's the case, then that's fine. But I think what really needs to happen is all the testing places need to be on the same page and doing what they need to do.
Yeah.
Because if that was the case, this wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. We need standardization. There's some testing facilities that use one method and one uses another. And then some, we don't even know when the last time they've calibrated their equipment, because I'm finding out that the CCD hasn't really been inspecting these guys. One of them said that I haven't been inspected since we were medical,
Wow.
This is the medical days, that's a long time ago. 2021 is when we kind of started this transition to the adult use era and everything. So, it's been a while. And so, they need to crack down on that because that's our first line of defense, our first and last really, is testing, to know what's in it. And if we don't have that, the whole industry breaks down and the trust in the industry breaks down. Then people start going back to the traditional market and getting it that way because, it's a source that they feel they can trust. But, those issues can still exist on the traditional market. And if not, it always is because, that's where you find a lot of products that couldn't make it on the legal side going to. We see it here in New Mexico. There's a lot of stuff getting backdoored, all over the place, stuff getting backdoored left and right. So that's where you see a lot of it anyway. So I'm always weary when someone says, oh yeah, I got some Jungle Boys, I'm like, was it something that couldn't be sold? Is that where you got it? I'm kind of weary when I see that, it's kind of scary. So,
what's the reason they're not selling it?
Yeah, exactly. I was like, well, why isn't it? Why, they make more money if they sell it. What's going on here? So, but I wanted to give you guys the information of, how it happened, what happened. I mean, what's your kind of thoughts on it so far? I mean, what's your, opinion on really what went down?
Well, from my understanding of it thus far is I mean, just like I said a moment ago, all those testing facilities need to be on the same page and going by the same, whatever is mandated by law, they need to be doing.
Yeah.
You know, it's not the manufacturer's fault
Yeah.
because he did what he was supposed to do.
Yeah.
You know, and it was if the testing facility would have been playing by the rules to begin with, this stuff wouldn't have gotten out to the public.
Yeah.
You know, what is this stuff going to do to those who smoked it?
Yeah.
And I think we need to find out who's at fault and make sure, you know, something happens to them for not being what they're supposed or doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Yeah. You know, because, you know, a lot of these issues, you know, stem from the grows. You know, we could usually blame the grow first, you know, and then, yeah, the manufacturer, he's just processing it. A lot of the times they send problematic material to a manufacturer to remediate a lot of those issues, because you can do that here in New Mexico. You can use that process to remediate. And so that's what they do a lot of the times to remediate those issues. It takes it right out, you know, depending on the process that you use. So it'll take a lot of those issues out. Unfortunately, in this time, I guess it didn't, or maybe the process they did, you know, they didn't know about it, so they couldn't pull that out with it. So that's another thing, you know, like that miss with testing. You know, this manufacturer may have or could have maybe implemented another step to pull that out, you know, or to pull it out of the material. You know,
If
I'm
they
not
knew
sure
about it.
If they knew about it. You know,
If
if
they
they
knew
knew about
about
it,
it.
maybe they could have done something about it. I guess is what I'm saying.
For sure.
You know, from the first. So, and I kind of feel that the CCD is to blame because their lack of oversight. You know, like, yes, the grows and everything, but they're the ones in charge. And right now we have an issue with people not following the rules and the law. And you know, that's known. And you know, when I talk to the CCD, you know, they're like, yeah, you know, like, you know, these things happen, blah blah blah. You know, like, we're still learning. You know, the industry's still learning, and that I can get. You know, like, okay, I get that. We're all still learning. So, you know, there doesn't seem like they're freaking out, but at the same time, when you contact the media first before you kind of like, I don't know, they have an email like mailing list for when updates happen that I get. Why couldn't they send it out to everybody else? You know, because what if I bought that and I wasn't aware of this? You know, what if I'm not on social media? You know,
Well, what's going to hit you first? A news article coming from the media, or that email if you're not signed up for it?
well, it depends. You know, if I don't have social media, I'm not going to see it.
Was it on the news itself?
It was on the news, but I was getting all of the information from social media or from people just sending it to me. You know, like just directly. So it really depends. Like, you know, for personally, I check my emails before I check my news. So I'm like, okay, let me see what I missed, or if anybody sent me an email for, you know, some whatever reason. And I would probably see it in my emails first, but that's just me. You know, like someone else, maybe they will go, you know, check the news first, you know, first thing in the morning. But you know, I had it sent to me directly. You know, like that morning, I woke up to a few texts. I was like confused. I was like, what's going on here?
And definitely the store should be contacting whoever it was sold to.
Yeah, I agree.
Step one. I mean, if it's got to be recalled, there's an issue, and that's how you get to the patient quickest. You know what I mean? Because the ones that bought it or the ones that have consumed it is the ones you want to get to first.
Yeah.
You know?
Because you know, we don't know what this does, and actually, I will tell you guys what Malathion is. So Malathion is it's a bug. It's an insecticide, really. You know, it's a bug killer. You know, it just affects their nerve system and, you know, essentially paralyzes them. What it does is it overloads their nervous system with sodium, and usually with sodium, it uses it to kind of fire off and work. But if you overload it, it just stops the nervous system completely, and it just causes paralysis. And that's what this does. It tricks the nervous system to keep putting sodium into the cells, which then, you know, pretty much kills the bug by starving it, you know, eventually. So that's how these work. Now, this is in very small dosages for bugs because they're very small. They have tested this on mice. You know, there's very limited tests on humans, though. I'll keep that out there. Human testing, they're very limited on, but it's also not very highly recommended to use it. But one thing that alarms me is Malathion is found in a bunch of products. You know, certain products that you just buy over the counter. Of course, you know, it's used to, you know, in the gardens and in certain grows and stuff to kill the bugs. However, it's found in lice shampoo as well. I guess it's good at killing lice. So they use it in lice shampoo, and, you know, you put it on your skin. Of course, in low dosages, they recommend it won't do anything, but, you know, it is used for that. Now, with the test that they use with the mice, I think they use 200 to 300 milliliters per kilogram of Malathion, which is a lot. So, you know, if like you did that to a human, that would be a lot of Malathion you're giving them. So that's why I'm saying the tests are really limited, you know, because the methods that they use needs to be tested more. They need to be scrutinized. They need to say, okay, well, they did it wrong here. Let's do it this way. Let's figure it out. I'm not saying Malathion is, not good for you. I mean, I agree it's not good for you, and there is a lot of list of things what it could do you and what it does do to you. But the studies on it are so limited that we shouldn't be having this in a lot of these products that we have in the first place. That it's found in so much. Like it's in lice shampoo, which is fairly ready available. And when I was a kid, there's kids who had lice and they had to use it, and of course, we were probably all subject to it.
Yeah.
So
The big difference is that you're using that as a topical,
yeah,
whereas the concentrates that were found to have it are being inhaled.
yeah, that's even
huge,
worse.
Huge issue there.
Yeah, and that's one thing that they haven't studied too is like, well, what does it do to you if you smoke it? I can probably guarantee you it's nothing good.
Yeah.
But I don't have the data or the studies to back that up.
Right.
So I can't say that with a fact, with science backing what it does to you.
Right.
What I can assume is nothing good, and the end result is probably not good either. And I'll say that it shouldn't be in our cannabis to start with, but this is what Malathion is, what it does, where it's found. Like even Orkin and like the biggest exterminators of the nation, they use it for mosquito sprays, and they use it for all their sprays outside. It's found within all the mixture that they use. So those guys, they're spraying left and right everywhere. I remember in the military, they were everywhere, spraying that crap everywhere. So Malathion, it's all over the place. So even if the grow didn't introduce it, which that's more likely a case, is the grow was the one that introduced it somehow. If it wasn't the grow, who knows where it came from? Maybe there's a bunch of spraying outside, it got into ventilation systems, it was on someone. I don't know. There's just not enough study or data to tell us exactly where this came from. We can make assumptions all day, but until we get a confirmation, it's just going to be that just assumptions and big speculations on things. But I just wanted you guys to get a real clue of what's going on with this Malathion thing, and I want everybody to get the facts, what's going on. There's certain people to blame, but there's certain people you can't really blame. Like if a manufacturer gets a material, and a lot of the times, from my experience, manufacturers will ask you, what would you use nutrient-wise? Would you put into it, blah, blah, blah. And if they lie, sometimes they'll tell you, well, I'm going to know because during my process, I can tell. When I pull it out, I can tell what was in there. And I'm going to ask you, hey, I asked you if, it had this and this because it's going to, affect the end result.
Mm-hmm.
You weren't honest with me, and now your stuff's shit, and it's not going to be good. So that's another thing, you're doing yourself a disservice if you're not being honest with your manufacturer. It's like lying to your doctor. If you're doing a disservice to yourself, because, in the end, they're going to figure it out. Just like this. I mean, 2 years later, this product obviously, I guess, wasn't moving very fast, but 2 years later, they found it, and they might start looking harder. And that was another question I asked the CCD that, I'm waiting for a response on is, are you guys going to change anything regulatory wise to crack down on this? Or, what's going to be the changes that you guys think need to go, going further? And I'll have to update you guys that next week when I get a response from them, because, I'm still waiting. And this is going to be something that, is ongoing. The cat's out the bag, the, can of worms is open, and a lot of people are starting to pay attention more to this testing thing. And, this is not going anywhere. And it's not even just like pesticides and things like that. We're having issues with the high THC stuff. Like there's cases of, places claiming that, oh, we have 40% THC, and that's laughable. Like that you don't have 40% THC. And the reason why I say that, and I can say it comfortably, is because in California and Colorado, they have started to crack down on their testing. And those THC levels are dropping. They're dropping to where they once were, because people are just trying to get up on it. Oh, I want it to be 50%. Who knows? We could have been to 70% at some point, if they didn't step in and do something. So I feel we need to do something in that, that area too, because if not, it's just going to get really bad,
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I mean, what have you experienced, when it comes to the THC? I mean, have you seen like other states or anything go like 40% or anything like that? Have you seen any of the 35s and up in the state?
I haven't. I think the highest I've seen in the state is about 32.
Yeah.
And that would be, THC, not TAC.
Yeah.
I have seen a 38 TAC.
Oh, really?
So there's that. The terpenes were like at 2% with a 31% THC.
Nice. Let you guys know THC is total active cannabinoids. Like everything put together. So that is a impressive number, to be honest. High 30% THC with a high in the terps. That's almost unheard of.
Yeah. And back before it became recreational, when it was just a medical industry. You had the time to educate patients coming in,
Mhm.
talk to them, and let them know that it's not always the THC number that's benefiting them, or well, that it's not the THC number,
Yeah.
completely. That's just a small portion to it.
Yeah.
But when recreational came about, the market changed completely. All they want is the cheapest weed and the highest THC for the most part.
Yeah.
And you could have something that says 31% on the thing, but it just be complete trash.
Yeah. It doesn't taste good, doesn't smoke good, doesn't get you high at all because there's nothing else in there.
Yeah.
It's not all about the THC. THC is great for killing pain and for other things like that, but if you're trying to have an all-around experience, you want the terpenes, you want the good smoke, the smell, you want it to have, a smooth kind of hit, and depending how you're consuming it, you want all that to be there because, it's a part of the plant. And only now are we kind of, well, not even now, we're barely starting to figure out how to grow this plant, and, for it to react because for so long we've just been crossbreeding it, and to try to just up the THC, just make it as potent as possible. But now, it's starting to change. A lot of people are starting to focus on the terps, on the flavor and everything, and like real craft cannabis. And I'm really glad to see that, because it's been a long time coming from ditch weed to where we are now. So
For
I
sure.
just hope we can continue that, that little trend and everything, dude. Because man, I hate shitty tasting weed.
Man, I had some the other day that it was a tester, and like I lit it and I took a couple hits, and I can do that usually and light it back up and it'll be the same thing. When I lit it back up, this one tasted like bong water. I was
Ooh.
like, what? I've never experienced that.
It's like, that's a new one.
Yeah.
It's like those Harry Potter jelly beans. Yeah, it's like, oh, I'm eating dirt. Great. Yay. Lovely for me.
I was like, I haven't had that taste in a long time. It's been a long time since I've hit a bong, but it took me straight back to that memory.
Oh, all the way. But yeah, we'll see what happens with the testing thing. Some of these issues, some people are cherry picking where they're taking their samples, and they're also cherry picking when they're pulling their samples. I'm a big firm believer of that. Possibly the Department of Ag, because this is on the hemp side. This is what they do. They go to your farm, they take the sample for you, they put it in an evidence bag, and then you send it off to the testing facility. You don't take the sample, so there's no cherry picking at that point. Like they have to pick what they pick. And people are cherry picking going to certain testing facilities because they know they're going to give them what they want versus what's there.
Right.
And
Right.
that's something that needs to change too. And that's actually what Colorado and California have done. And I'm sure New Mexico is going to look to see how they did that and kind of try to, enforce it our own way,
Right.
because, New Mexico has to do things its own way. It's just how it works here. So
Don't you think like your idea with somebody coming from like the Department of Ag and pulling the sample for you, don't you think that'll bottleneck and backlog everything?
it could, but that's where more funding and everything needs to be funneled to these areas. Like CCD needs more funding. That's why we're running into
for
certain issues
sure.
there. So I think if we fund that area, or maybe mimic what they're doing on the hemp side, because there isn't that many hemp farms in New Mexico now. Maybe mimic that to the CCD side, because I talked to the director, a couple months back, and talked about how many hundreds of to almost thousands of different inspectors they hired. I was like, cool, but what about the testing stuff?
Right.
So it could backlog, but at the same time, it'll just create another step to ensure that they're not trying to fudge numbers. And right now, some places I don't even know if they're testing it. I don't know if they're fudging everything to put it into the system, because there's a lot of traditional market out there, and
Yeah.
a lot of the times I'm sure it's not even tested.
For sure.
Yeah. So, but yeah, it's just an idea. We'll see what happens. In the future, I do think that something needs to happen from from them pulling the sample all the way to the getting it tested and afterwards. So we'll have to see. No one's done it right yet. People are still trying to figure it out. We're barely going to year 2, so we'll see what happens in the next couple years. Hopefully we'll figure it out by year 5.
Definitely.
Yeah. So, but anyway, that's all I have for this conversation. Do you have anything else before we move on to the very last one?
No, I have something I'll touch on, just reaching out to reciprocal patients after we're done.
Okay, we'll leave it at the end when I do my little bonus stuff for sure.
Cool.
So this last thing, it's really not going to take long, but this is something that I've gotten personal reports about, and it's the Border Patrol. We're having a lot of problems with the Border Patrol now. And at first, it kind of seemed like they were just kind of hands off and leaving it to whatever, because we had to write paperwork and this and that. But it looks like that's changed in about the last month. So I'm getting word that there's been over 6 incidences where the Border Patrol has taken a legal courier in the New Mexico cannabis industry and taking all of their product, and leaving them with nothing.
Are we talking about a courier company transporting for another company?
Just courier, someone
Okay.
couriering,
Gotcha.
like not for a company, but just, someone, doing the services of couriering.
Gotcha.
They're doing it for the company or they're doing it for a third party. Either way, I've heard it's been happening about 6 times this month. Now, that's just this month so far. It could go and start happening more and more often. I have no clue. I hope it doesn't. But this is a trend that scares the shit out of me because this is something that we've feared this whole time.
Definitely.
This is something that has plagued southern New Mexico and has actually made people weary of even opening up down here.
Yeah, for sure. I heard a story today about some stuff getting caught at the border, legal BioTrack stuff within the state.
Yeah.
And them taking it all. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's happening more and more often. Again, it's a game to these guys.
Yeah.
These guys feel, just because they're federal agents, federal officers. I mean, technically they don't have to follow New Mexico state law, especially because when you pull off to their property, you're on federal property.
Yeah.
But I mean, these guys are just having fun, taking the boredom out on us.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, these two, they're 100 miles away from any border. Because these inland border checks, what I'm talking about, they're inland border checks. They're 100 miles from the border because the Border Patrol is allowed to do that within 100 miles. They have jurisdiction within 100 miles of a border. So they're allowed to have these checkpoints. They have them. They've all over the area. Actually, here in Las Cruces, I can't go any direction without hitting one. I can't go east, north, west, whatever. I hit one. Doesn't matter. So I've spent my whole life trying to visit my family, run into border checks. So you have to slow down. You pull over, and they ask you, are you American? And sometimes they'll start asking you more questions. And sometimes the drug dog will be out there. Even though they're supposed to be looking for immigrants, they have a drug dog out there.
Mm-hmm.
And they're sniffing this, and then they harass patients. I've been harassed before too, searched. They threw my crap everywhere, treating me like I'm a hard-earned criminal and started asking me stupid questions. And, they were being assholes.
Definitely.
And then it was a game to them. They were like laughing in my face.
Yep.
And that's not cool. Like that what the hell? You're playing games with people's lives when you should be at the actual border doing what your name says, patrolling the border.
Correct.
Why are you 100 miles inland harassing American citizens who haven't left the damn county, let alone the state or the country? So that's my problem with these, is that more people get harassed than they do good for people. You know what I mean? Like, they only catch a very small amount of percentage of drugs that get through.
For sure.
Like, when you see like a drug bust online, oh, the Border Patrol sees this much, that means the harder shit got through, or the other stuff got through already. They only bust a very small percentage, just like they only bust a very small percentage of people that get through the border as well.
For sure.
So it's unfortunate that this is happening, and I'm getting word that some of these agents, not only do they get cartel pay from some of them that let the cartel guys go through, they're also getting cannabis industry pay from some of the companies in the state.
Wow.
So some of the companies in the state have broken down. I'm sure it's happened to them a couple times, and they're just like, look, we'll pay you. I don't know how it happens. So this could also be some of these agents' way of trying to get more money, because this is kind of alarming.
True.
How many it's happened. It's happened 6 times in a month, and like before that, they were just like, whatever, so maybe they know the decrim thing is coming, the deschedule, and they're still like, well, I'm just going to try to make as much money as I can off these guys. Yeah. I'm going to triple dip. I'm going to get federal money, I'm going to get cartel money, and I'm going to get cannabis industry money. Now, this is to say, guys, this isn't every agent, this isn't every Border Patrol person, but this does happen. And there's news articles on it, like when this does happen and when they get busted. So that's how we know this kind of stuff is going on. And then, people in the industry also tell me, yeah, we paid them off, like they don't mess with us anymore. And so that's their thing. I have no, whatever with that. That's how they want to go about it. That's up to them.
Right.
But, it's to me alarming, 6 times. And to me, that's, screaming this.
Yeah. And I've heard not even just like product having large amounts of cash.
Yeah.
And, some have even had like their paperwork showing that it's from the business, and because it's a cannabis business, they take it.
Yeah.
So they're going after cash and products.
Yeah. Yeah. And it just seems like, they're acting like, thugs now, and I don't know why. This came out of nowhere, and it's unfortunate. It's alarming because, the industry in southern New Mexico thrives on getting through that border. If we can't get through that border, we can't sell our product, and then, we're screwed.
Yep.
And there's not much we can do state-wise because this is a federal thing. You know, like I don't know what the state can do. You know, that's not my area, but you know, something needs to happen and it needs to happen soon because the federal government just doesn't care. You know, like this industry, and this is for any border industry. This affects California too. You know, like California is well within that 100 miles too on its southern border, Arizona, us, Texas. So this isn't just New Mexico that this could be happening in. You know, this could be happening in Arizona and California, and we don't even know about it.
For sure.
You know, it's just, you know, people are just starting to tell me. This hasn't even hit the news. This is, you know, straight up, you know, industry information that people that are going through this are telling me. So this isn't even in the news yet.
Yeah.
So, you know, this is something that I felt was important because, especially us down here, we like I said, rely on that damn border. So yeah, guys, just be careful out there, be vigilant. Have all your paperwork and documentation in hand. You know, if this happens to you, unfortunately, there's really not much we can do. You know, just hope that it changes and hope that they aren't, you know, trying to, you know, extort money from us, you know, just to get us through the border check, because you know that does happen. I wouldn't recommend doing that and paying them because that could go bad for you too. You know,
Eventually,
legal-wise.
it'll all come to light.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one thing I want to say, you know, eventually only time will tell and we'll figure out what's going on with this. You know, if it's something like is going on with the government, there's something scarce going on, or if they are trying to get more money from us. So we'll see. You know, only time will tell. I mean, what do you have thoughts on that one?
I know that like Representative Ray Lotta out of the Sunland Park area was trying to tackle this issue for the state. I don't know where he's gotten, but I know it is on the radar to some representatives.
Yeah.
I think it needs to be more, and we need to figure out something we can do. Unfortunately, with the way it sits at federal level, um, there's not too much we can do, but there's got to be something. You know, we with it being illegal, it's hard for cannabis businesses to get banks,
Yeah.
but they're doing it.
Yeah.
There are businesses out there, there are banks out there that will work with cannabis businesses. We got to figure out some way to come to an amicable agreement um, to allow us to operate, even regardless of what the federal law is.
Yeah.
You know, and you know, hopefully, if it comes out that these agents are accepting payment or something like that hits, you know, daylight, then it'll bring that reconsideration quicker.
Yeah.
You know,
Definitely.
because now these agents are doing something illegal. You know, in a legal market. So
Yeah.
we've got to figure out the medium.
Yeah, 100%. You know, because if not, you know, businesses are literally going to lose their livelihood, you know, just because these guys want to just have a little fun, you know, at our expense, you know. So, yeah, but that's all I have. But you had one more thing you wanted to talk about the patients too?
I did. So I'm big at helping reciprocal patients get into the program. There aren't that many dispensaries that know how. They're starting to come around, but anybody, whether in Texas, New Mexico, you know, if you have another uh, state license, Arizona, you can get a hold of me and the team at Astro Buds and Chaparral. Man, we can get you in the program quickly.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, he means if you have your card and stuff like that, you know, they can get you the paper and all the documentation. Cause like I said, some people don't know how to do it.
Yeah,
They won't
and
do it. Yeah.
And if you're in Texas and need to get into that program, get at me and I can definitely guide you there too because I got people contacting me all across Texas to get into the program, and then to get into New Mexico's following that. So
Yeah. So,
you know, I'm there for the patients and so is the team. My team is well trained on getting them in and getting it done.
cool. Awesome, man. Well, I appreciate that. And, you know, thanks for all you do in the industry. And I look forward to keeping up the fight, brother.
Yeah.
It's a long fight. All right, guys. Well, I'll see you next week. And I'll try to keep you guys updated when you're on both of all these topics. And we'll see what happens next week. All right.